What?
Sell your performance.
You're having a swim, were you?
I didn't have time for a swim.
Right. No good. It's dreadful. Are we good to go? Yeah.
Okay, the Minister for Housing is claiming that the motion of no confidence that we put is a stunt. It is quite the opposite. We have felt compelled to put this motion forward because of the consistent refusal of the government to take on board proposals that would stop people being evicted into homelessness, that would reduce rents, that would deal with the scandal of vacant and empty property and the failure to deliver public housing on public land. It's precisely because the government won't listen to positive proposals put forward by the opposition to address what is an absolutely dire housing and homelessness crisis. We have no choice but to use this opportunity to put maximum pressure on the government to abandon absolutely dismally failed policies that have left us with the worst housing and homelessness crisis imaginable, and where that crisis continues to get worse on a daily basis. I mean, literally, the day before we submitted the motion, I have a family on the phone to me, bawling, crying, who are facing now court proceedings in February for the eviction from their home where they have lived since the 1950s. They've done absolutely nothing wrong. They're working people. They have nowhere to go. The government claimed there was an eviction ban to prevent this happening, but actually they're facing court proceedings to evict them in February from a place where they and their two teenage children have lived all their lives. So that is the reality of the failure of government policy. Failure to agree to policies that would reduce rents and make them affordable. Failure to deliver a single council house in Dublin in the whole of this year. Failure to take measures that would get hold of vacant and empty property that we could use to house people. So we have no choice but to say we have no confidence in the policies that this minister and this government are putting forward. And I just say a word about the planning stuff, because you see there's a narrative that the government are trying to put out, which is that the reason we have a housing crisis is because of local people protesting and objecting. That is absolute nonsense and is a very cynical attempt to distract from the real problem, which is the government constantly trying to facilitate property investors and property speculators who are the real cause of the housing crisis. We have more than 70,000 apartments in this country have planning permission to be built, but we're only getting 5,000 a year. Why? Because investors who have planning permission are drip feeding property into the market at a very slow pace to ensure that rents and property prices stay high. But the government won't take measures to deal with rampant speculation and profiteering by property investors. Instead, they want to change the law to facilitate them more to speculate on land values by gaining planning permissions where they never build. So what we want are measures to end the speculation, to use vacant and zoned sites to develop them for public housing and take them away from people who are just profiteering and exploiting the housing misery that huge numbers of people in this country are facing.
Richard, the Minister is likely to survive the motion tonight, and the government and himself will probably hail that as a victory. What should he take away from this?
I hope that it will highlight the need for this government to abandon failed policies. Now, of course, I mean, it's ironic that the government criticised the opposition falsely for not putting forward positive proposals when we have consistently done so and they ignore them, but actually by manipulating the Dáil schedule this week and replacing our no confidence motion with a confidence motion, he has drastically reduced the time we have to put forward positive proposals and to highlight the things that we think need to be done in order to address the housing crisis. But what we are going to do, as we have done with the Raise the Roof protest, with the protest that is going to happen this Saturday on the day that the new Taoiseach is going to be nominated is put every single bit of pressure we can on this government to adopt policies that will actually address the housing crisis, to do something about vacant properties, to take them into, reactivate them to use to address the housing crisis, to take measures to control rents and reduce the cost of rent, to start actually delivering public housing on public land, which they are singularly failing to do.
Okay, just in terms of positive policy initiatives on your behalf, how many houses a year would people for profit build? How much would it cost the state, and how would you get over the problems whereby planning permissions or planning applications are delayed sometimes for many years because of objections that work their way through the courts? I mean, there is a problem with a bottleneck in relation to the planning process itself.
There is no problem. We have more planning permissions for more than 70,000 apartments in this country, 40,000 of them in Dublin. But as the Economic Evaluation Service of the government themselves pointed out at the weekend, there's only 5,000 commencements a year of those apartments. So what's happening is property developers and speculators are sitting on planning permissions, watching the value of their investment go up, and in fact have an interest in not building so they can keep house prices and property values in. We have said it consistently over the last number of years. We would build 20,000 public and affordable houses a year. That would require at least a doubling of the capital investment, but crucially, we want the money directed towards the local authorities building themselves rather than subsidies going to private developers who are then exploiting the housing crisis by speculating on land and property values.
Sorry, within the private sector, pick up wider issue.
Sorry, Paul, I think you were first. Yeah, sorry.
Just on the bill itself, you mentioned the wider concern that your party has in relation to the reliance on the private sector to deliver homes. That aside, of what you know of the legislation at the moment, is there anything that you would welcome, or is there any particular concern that you have about it?
I think it is absolutely unacceptable that they are trying to restrict the right of people to submit their views on planning and essentially facilitate private developers to get more planning permissions when they're not actually building. What I'd like to see, and here's a proposal we made which the government rejected, we would like to see the planning regulations change so that we get more than 20% social and affordable housing of the developments that do happen. If they increase that to, for example, 50%, we would dramatically impact on the provision and social and affordable housing and the housing crisis that we face. But I guarantee you the government will not do that.
Sorry, you said 20,000 affordable.
Public and affordable houses, yeah.
So you still need the private sector to pick up the slack on the other, 15,000 minimum we need extra a year?
No, but I think that's an absolute minimum that the state has to deliver itself, as against what we have actually seen, which is approximately 2,000 public houses being delivered a year for the last 5 years. That's what's actually happened. Most of the government's claimed figures for the delivery of public and affordable housing are actually private development. We want to see the state directly provide 20,000 public and affordable housing, and then on top of that, the Part 5, getting a higher proportion of private developments for public and affordable housing, controlling rents to make them affordable, stopping no-fault evictions, and indeed buying properties where people are faced with evictions.
Richard, who's going to build 20,000 social affordable homes a year? Because you have to admit that the local authorities have been stripped of all the tools there, haven't they?
Yeah, again, we have argued for some time that the state has to develop its own construction capacity, which it used to have and has been run down consistently. In our view, we need a state construction company so that the state and local authorities are directly employing building workers, tradespeople and so on to actually go out and build the houses. As long as we're reliant on private developers whose main agenda is to make money, not to solve the housing crisis, we are not going to get the delivery of housing that we need. And you can see with the commencement figures slowing down significantly at the moment, the evidence that that's the case.
Do you not accept that we need private developers, at least for the time being, next year perhaps?
Look, private developers are going to do what private developers are doing. Our point is you can't rely on them to solve what is an absolutely dire housing crisis.
The actual 20,000 homes that you need a year.
If you contract developers directly, you will certainly have to do that, and that's how some council estates were doing. But the point is, we need to build up our own construction capacity. What the government are doing are relying on private developers to build their own developments and then maybe get a small portion of them for public and affordable housing. That strategy has failed. We've been doing it now for more than a decade, and it has absolutely failed, and failed disastrously.
I suppose the debate we're having here just shows you why the government didn't want people before profit to have more time to explain the alternatives that can be put forward to their absolutely shocking failure on the housing issue. And it's not just Darragh O'Brien, who we've absolutely no faith in, but he's part of a continuum of ministers for the last 10 to 12 years who've allowed this crisis to get worse and worse year on year and have failed to do anything about it, anything meaningful. So we're facing into Christmas. I think it's really appropriate that we're having this debate in Christmas week, but some families, quite a lot of them, will be having their third and fourth Christmas in emergency accommodation. More families will be having their 10th and 12th Christmas in overcrowded conditions, and many people will be utterly homeless and without hope facing into Christmas. And more, of course, will be paying more than 60% of their income on rent and finding it difficult to look after Santa Claus. So for all of these reasons, we have no confidence in Darragh O'Brien and what he's doing with the housing policy, and that was why we put the motion. We intend to continue to highlight their failure and to mobilise people to protest against their failure, because it's a shocking situation for hundreds of thousands of people at this stage. Those who have accommodation but are paying way too much in rent, mortgages are going up, and then of course you have those who are failed by the housing policies. Over 100,000 in housing need, the highest numbers ever in emergency accommodation, and like I said, many hundreds of families facing their third and fourth Christmas in hotels and inappropriate accommodation. So it isn't good enough, and this government should not get away with it. Darragh O'Brien can be replaced with anybody, but it's the policies that rely on the private developer and the need for them to make profit out of what is essentially a function that society should be engaged in without having the for-profit motive: the provision of safe, affordable, secure housing. All right.
So I want to say a few words about the Energy Poverty Fund coming before Cabinet today. This 10 million does not go far enough, does not go nearly far enough. So here's the situation. Households got their first €200 credit late November, start December for most people. I would say that a very large percentage of households in the state will burn through most or all of that credit during the course of this cold spell. I spoke to a woman last night living on the north side of Cork City. True, her house is an old corporation house. I wouldn't have the highest BR rating. She is at the moment spending €10 a day on the electric, €10 a day on the gas, and €7 a day on coal and blocks. So on day 8 of the cold snap, she will burn through her €200. Now, she said to me, I'll be okay. We've got 2 wages coming into this house and we'll get through the Christmas all right. But for a household that doesn't have those wages coming in, what's going to happen to them? They'll wait until January of next year to get their next €200. Where are they on Christmas week? Where are they the week after Christmas week? And what is the government saying to them? There's €10 million there. Go to MABS. Go to a loan. Go to the Department of Social Welfare. The Department of Social Welfare will be closed some of those days over the Christmas. This is really not good enough, and I will be raising it with the Taoiseach today at about 20 to 3 under promised legislation, and I will be raising it in a very vigorous way. The government think they've sorted this problem out by throwing this 10 million on the table. They certainly have not. And on that, by the way, there's 117,000 pay-as-you-go gas company customers in the state. There's 340,000 pay-as-you-go electric connections. Now, some of them are holiday homes and the like, but clearly there's hundreds of thousands of pay-as-you-go households in this country. If 100,000 households went into that fund to the tune of €100 each, it'd be gone. And it's meant to be for bill pay customers as well, who are vulnerable customers who are struggling through. It's not going to be enough. And also, what are they asking the private energy companies, including the private pay-as-you-go companies, one of which, I mean, you're talking about millionaires and billionaires owning one of those companies. What are they being asked to put on the table? It's the taxpayers' money that goes on the table, and the energy companies aren't being asked to fork out whatsoever. It's a real scandal. So this is going to be raised today. And
what's enough?
There needs to be a serious calculation done. I'm not in a position to give an exact figure, but it clearly needs to be a multiple of the 10 million that's being put on the table at the moment, and more than that. And it's the most important point, actually. The moratorium on electricity and gas disconnections, which is there for bill pay customers, needs to be extended to pay-as-you-go customers as well. Needs to be extended. I raised this with the Taoiseach at the end of September. They've had 2.5 months on this. Now, they say that there's technical issues about having a moratorium on disconnections for pay-as-you-go customers. If you're a pay-as-you-go customer, you can't be disconnected on a bank holiday. You can't be disconnected on a weekend. So why can't they say you can't be disconnected on any day with a Y in it? It needs to be done. I suspect there's pushback there from the prepaid companies.
Do you have evidence that they have disconnected pay-as-you-go customers?
I have stories that I've heard on radio programmes this morning about it. I don't have the concrete evidence, but I've no reason to disbelieve the stories that were told on radio this morning.